Over the years, several lodges around the lake were built, including the luxurious North Shore Tavern that offered tennis courts and sailboats. In Blue Jay, the first ice rink in the San Bernardino Mountains was constructed, and a 9-hole golf course was built in Grass Valley. Years later, in 1979, the Lake Arrowhead village was demolished in a controlled fire by the Fire Protection District. It was replaced by an even larger 2-level complex that retains the alpine atmosphere of the original village. During the first 10 years of this century, transportation to Bear Valley was limited by a lack of public roads. The Big Bear Lake community of Pine Knot remained fairly small. Summer lodging for tourists was adequately handled by Knight's Camp and Pine Knot Lodge. However, things were about to change. In 1910, Knight's Toll Road from Green Valley to Fawnskin was purchased by San Bernardino County. Work began immediately on this and other roads into the mountains to bring them up to highway standards. By 1915, the Rim of the World Highway through the San Bernardino Mountains to Big Bear Lake was completed. Now anyone with a car could drive to Big Bear. The effect on the sleepy community of Pine Knot at Big Bear Lake was immediate. Tourists poured into the valley. In 1913, there had only been 2 resorts operating. By 1921, the number had increased to 52, with more going in every year. Property values soared. The Bear Valley Mutual Water Company started subdividing and selling its land around the lake to meet the demand of vacation homeowners. Sawmills sprang up all over the valley to provide a steady supply of cut lumber for the new housing boom. Gus Knight purchased additional land adjacent to his Knight's Camp and developed the Wild Rose subdivision. Like it or not, sleepy Big Bear Lake was well on its way to becoming a major year-round resort. The new Rim of the World Drive entered Bear Valley on the north side of the lake. Real estate developers Clinton E. Miller and William Klein took advantage of this fact and began construction of a major new resort and subdivision on the North Shore in the Grout Bay area in 1916. They call the development the Fawnskin Resort. With the Rim of the World Drive going right through the middle of the new development, lots were sold as fast as they could be subdivided. By 1919, the new Fawnskin community was growing rapidly. The main building and offices of the Fawnskin Resort would later become the popular landmark North Shore Tavern.
Fawnskin Tavern, that was the name in later years. It was originally called the Fawnskin Tea Room. And early in the motor transit days, and perhaps even as far back as the Mountain Auto Line days, it was a stage stop, and a restaurant was there, and quite a popular place. Unfortunately, it burned a few years ago, and all that remains is the fireplace where it stood.
With Fawnskin now on the map, new resorts began rapidly appearing along the north side of the lake. The most impressive lodge on the north side of Big Bear Lake was the Samarkand. It had a main lodge and a dance hall right on the lake.
Ah, the Samarkand. I have some fond memories of the Samarkand. The Samarkand was located below Gray's Camp on a point there, right along the highway. And it was a dance hall, restaurant, and also a hotel. The main thing about the Samarkand was it had a gorgeous view across the lake and looking at the South Shore. And on a moonlight night, it was really a great place to dance. It was beautiful. The Samarkand was owned by Coy Brown, who also had a sawmill in Holcomb Valley. And
on the east side of Fawnskin was Dana's Camp, now open to the public as Dana Point Park. And located a little further east was Moon Camp. Its name was derived from the unusual crescent shape of its main building.
Hanging over the fireplace was a cutout of a crescent moon, and it was a very nice place to eat, too, by the way. Across the street was a service station, and then further up on the hill to the north were a number of cabins, very large. It was quite an extensive camp. They also had a boat landing there, and it was at this point that the ferry Ooh La La used to cross to the South Shore in the early days of the Rim of the World Drive. And this ferry saved driving clear up to Division to cross the lake in those early days. Very little ferry, it would only hold 2 cars at a time, but that was probably all the business that was available anyway.
Moon Camp burned to the ground in 1951. Today's Juniper Marina, 1 mile west of Stanfield Cutoff, was once the site of Camp Juniper and the Menalusa Post Office. The post office building, located across from the marina, is still standing. After the initial building rush of the 1920s was over, Fawnskin settled into a more leisurely pace. Little has changed since this 1940s photograph was taken, except that most of the resorts that once dotted the north shore of Big Bear Lake are now gone. With increasing competition for the tourist trade, the new lodges being built around the lake were getting larger and more luxurious. We are at the popular Blue Whale restaurant. This is the exact same spot that one of the most popular and expensive resorts in Big Bear once sat. It was called Stillwell's. Built in 1919 on a point north of the village, this resort had everything, including an incredible view. Stillwell's provided their guests with a fleet of boats, a large dance pavilion, tennis courts, and even a swimming pool.
Stillwell's, even through the winter, they had dances every Saturday night. Canned music, of course, but it was delightful. They had a rotating ball that hung from the ceiling and threw colored lights on it. And they reflected, of course, through the entire ballroom. And in the winter, they'd have a big old fire going in that big fireplace. And it was just a neat place to go. Old Ma Stillwell, though, she ran it with a tight fist. I mean, everybody had to behave themselves. But it was an exciting era and interesting to be there.
Disaster struck in April of 1928 when the main pavilion was destroyed by fire. Owner Carl Stillwell replaced it immediately with a larger one, and because of its location, the resort continued to be one of the most desirable resorts in Big Bear. But 17 years later, Stillwell's burned again. It was rebuilt one more time, but was never able to achieve its former glory. Stillwell's is gone, but diners at the Blue Whale can still enjoy the same magnificent sunsets that guests viewed over 70 years ago. In 1917, F.C. Percival built the beautiful Big Bear Tavern in the quiet, secluded Metcalf Bay several miles west of the village. In addition to the large 2-story lodge, its lakefront location had many private cabins. This impressive lodge still exists today as the Presbyterian Conference Grounds. It has been carefully maintained and preserved over the years and looks today very much as it did in the 1920s. This scene shows the tavern being used as a movie set in one of the hundreds of films that have been made in Big Bear Valley. To the east of the Big Bear Tavern sat Holloway's Camp. Still in existence today, this popular resort was a landing for the Moon Camp ferry that ran between the north and south side of the lake.
I think Dad Holloway was probably the only landing up here where he built his own boats. And he built a lot of them, flat-bottom rowboats, and later they had Evinrude 4 or 5 horsepower kickers on them. Holloway's Camp today is, of course, a favorite place for RVers to come and stay at Big Bear.
Still in operation today is the Knoll Lodge, located at a point where the Rim of the World Highway left Bear Valley. Stocker Lodge, located on the east side of the village, was originally called Swastika Lodge when it was built in 1916. The swastika was an Indian good luck symbol long before it became associated with Hitler's Germany. The popular Andrews Camp sat on Big Bear Boulevard just east of Main Street. The boulevard today bears little resemblance to the quiet country road of the 1920s. Further east down Big Bear Boulevard is the Big Bear Golf and Country Club. It was opened up in the Rathbun Creek area, now known as Moonridge, in 1927.
A fellow by the name of Spaulding purchased the part of the old Tommy's Ranch and turned it into a subdivision. And he was very interested in obtaining a nice name for it, and he offered a free lot to any individual that could come up with an appropriate name. And some lucky individual came up with Moonridge and now has a nice home on that lot.
Not all of the resort activity in Big Bear was taking place around the lake. This is the intersection of Big Bear Boulevard and Greenway in the heart of Big Bear City. On this corner sits one of Big Bear's oldest landmarks, the community market. This historic family-run business was established at a time when most of Big Bear's grand resorts were being built. And it was during this time when Big Bear's most exclusive resort was built just a few hundred yards north of the community market. It was called the Peter Pan Woodland Club, and it literally put Big Bear City on the map. Built in 1926 as a private members-only resort, it was used to promote a new real estate development. The club had its own golf course, swimming pool, tennis courts, a movie theater, and even its own water system that also supplied water to what was to become Big Bear City. The guest list at the Woodland Club read like a who's who from Hollywood.
The club house was built by Maltby, was very rustic design. Perhaps its most prominent feature was a famous fireplace that had a little train running around through waterfalls and tunnels and so on. And it was highly publicized at the time.
The beautiful clubhouse was destroyed by a fire in 1948, and the land was gradually sold off. Since then, the Big Bear Museum, the Big Bear City Park, and the east end of the airport now sit on what used to be the golf course. Big Bear City is also home to one of the more interesting geological features in Bear Valley, a natural hot spring. In 1924, E.C. Jesserin built the lavish Pan Hot Springs Inn on that site. Indoor and outdoor swimming pools were built to take advantage of the naturally warm waters flowing from the earth. In 1933, the huge hotel burned to the ground.
I happened to be there the night that they opened the hotel, and they held a dance with an orchestra from Southern California. It was a very beautiful hall, and they had imported suits of armor from Europe, and there were several of them around the room with beautiful tapestries hanging on the walls, and he had a chandelier also that had come from Europe. Of course, all this was lost in the fire.
The swimming pools and their buildings were saved and opened to the public. Earthquake damage in the early 1990s forced the closure and demolition of these historic swimming pools. However, most of the early resorts in Big Bear were being built on the west end of the valley around the lake. And it was during this time that camps and businesses started springing up between Pine Knot Lodge and the south shore of Big Bear Lake. Throughout the 1920s, places with names such as Navajo Hotel, Bartlett's, Indian Lodge, the Grizzly Theater, and Chad's became the center of community activity. This area slowly began to evolve in today's Big Bear Village. Taking a drive down Village Drive in the 1920s, we start at the east end of town with the newly constructed Navajo Hotel, now known as the Navajo Mall. Directly across the street is the Big Bear Pavilion, where the Village Theater now sits. Looking west down Village Drive are the original wood frame buildings that eventually would be replaced by the shops and stores of today. Further down the street, we can see the new Chad's restaurant under construction next to Bartlett's Camp. At the west end of the village is Baird's department store, originally known as Heller's and eventually McNeil's Trading Post. The view down Pine Knot Boulevard, where the post office sits today, was considered the outskirts of town. Rodeos, parades, and other summer events were organized to draw more tourists. Throughout the 1920s, Big Bear Village continued to grow at a rapid pace. Some resort owners got carried away. This was the Prohibition era, and it was common knowledge throughout Southern California that liquor was flowing in Big Bear, along with slot machines and other forms of gambling. In July of 1923, federal officers decided to put a stop to all of this when they raided Big Bear. 17 resort owners and employees were arrested for serving liquor and operating gambling establishments. And then, a month later, the owners of the Grizzly Inn were arrested for gambling and liquor violations. During all of this, Big Bear was overflowing with vacationers, but only during the summers.